when I started drawing in the other connections between, like looking at the 2 and the 2 and the 2 and the 3 and the 3 and the 4, it gets a little convoluted. And it almost seems arbitrary to just look at the ones that are directly next to each other on the number line, doesn't it? Hopefully you could appreciate that. That might be a reason it's not used. I don't know if it's the only reason it's not used. But at heart is the idea of distance. I think you guys have got that in your mind. You're like, it's something about how far apart they are. It's something about how far apart they are. And that really is it. But it's not how far apart they are from each other. That's not how statisticians measure dispersion. They don't measure it with how far apart the data points are from each other. So how do they measure it? Those of you that have heard of standard deviation before, they measure, I know, thrilling. They measure deviation not from the individual data points, from the average. That's how we measure, that's how I say we, that's how statisticians measure standard deviation. They don't measure standard deviation. I keep using this phrase, standard deviation. We'll come back to it. What they do is, they say, okay, I love this, and I'm not going to use it because it's not used in general. But what they do is, they say, okay, remember all that work you guys did to understand what the averages were for this data set? Don't throw that away, because that's the problem, right, Eric? By looking at just the distances between the data points, where'd the 81 go? That wonderful 81 you guys focused on first when you said they have the same center, it's gone. We didn't even look at that. Don't lose that. Don't lose that. That's important. X bar equals 81. Yes. Don't throw that away. Here's what I want you to think of. Over here, you've got measures of center and measures of consistency. I never want you to separate those two things from this point on. I want them to be fused. Right? I want you to think of them together. I don't want you to separate them. Looking at one and not the other, unfortunately, well, we'll get more into that as we start getting quantifiable measures down. But looking at one at the expense of paying attention to the other one, well, you saw what happens if you look at center without spread. Bert and Ernie are exactly the same. But they're not exactly the same, right? They're not exactly the same. They're the same on center. But they're very, very different in some other way. If you only look at how they're different, you're going to forget how they're the same. So why not look at both at the exact same time? I think that's the way we should go. And it's not because I think it, it's because that's what's done. And a quarter of you already know this because you've already seen it in other classes. I'm assuming you've never seen it, so I like to build it from the ground up today, if that's okay with you guys. But not right now, because you got that look that you want to walk around and get some air. So let's walk around and get some air, and then come back and do some more of this. Yes. Yes.